Welcome back to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. Our conversation continues now with Bill Wright, radio personality and production director and voiceover talent. And also, just a reminder before we get back to the conversation, subscribe to our YouTube channel right now. Tell your friends. You can also follow us on Instagram at JoshDJ57. That's JoshDJ57. And last time, Bill and I were discussing the preservation of classic radio shows as well as classic TV shows. There's a company called Obsolete Video Services. They're based out of Arizona, and they've been getting a lot of videotapes of TV, well, especially in Los Angeles, that was recorded off of old VCRs from the 70s. And so they've discovered a lot of great treasures from different newscasts from CBS 2's The Big News at KNXT Channel 2, News Service 4 from KNBC, and then early ABC 7 Eyewitness News when he had broadcasters like John Handbrink, John Schubeck, Stu Nahan being on the channel. I was used to him being on Channel 4 and then Channel 5. I didn't realize he was on Channel 7. I was too young to remember that. But it's really cool seeing that. Plus, they've also discovered episodes of certain shows that they didn't think existed anymore, from Jeff Edwards' game show, The New Treasure Hunt, which has very few episodes intact. They discovered one they thought was lost forever. So, but they're talking about, we're getting these new tapes and we're in the process of baking them and then transferring them. And so it's really cool to hear about stuff like that.
Yeah, restoration technology is absolutely amazing. I see that more and more of even like the old Three Stooges have been restored, and they look so good, pristine. It looks like it was shot yesterday, and some of these go back into the 30s.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just amazing what you can do. And it's very painstaking work, I understand. You have to be very patient because you're going frame by frame.
Yeah, and especially with those old ones. I remember I was talking to John F. Schneider, who runs theradiohistorian.org, and he talked about a lot of, unfortunately, the early radio shows have been lost forever in the ether, as he said. But beginning in the mid-1930s is when they started saving tapes of radio programs. He says now there's probably about 70% of those that were recorded since 1935 are intact as far as the old radio series were concerned, which is great to hear because I didn't think it was that much.
Yeah. Well, and you know, just as he'd been saying that, I recall that our mutual friend Jim Governale was involved in an old tape incident having to do with Vin Scully. Mm-hmm. And when he called Sandy Koufax's no-hitter, apparently the station was not recording Vinny, and someone Jim knew had gone out, wanted to hear the game, and turned on their reel-to-reel machine and actually had that recorded. And do you remember Jim somehow got in the middle of that? And
yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, he ended up giving that tape to the Dodgers, for which he received a great commendation.
Oh yeah, and then he got to meet Vin Scully that day, and I saw the picture.
Dream.
And I never got to meet Vin Scully. How about you?
Not Vin Scully. I did get to meet Chick Hearn, the other great.
Yeah, I did too.
Los Angeles. Yeah, he was down at one of the local shoe outlets here, and was so nice. And I also wanted to just commiserate with him about that shot that Don Nelson took in the 1969 finals that missed so badly it bounced straight up and straight down. I said, Chick, to this day, I've never gotten over it. He goes, you and me both. But he was so nice. Yeah. No, Vin Scully, I didn't, but what a gentleman. And what a great broadcaster. Probably the best of all time in anything.
Oh, yeah. I got to meet Ross Porter about 8 years ago. And he and Vinny were teamed up together for 27 years. And he said, Vinny and I still talk every couple of weeks, and we're great friends. Unfortunately, it was the McCourt family that let Ross Porter go. That was one of the worst things about McCourt was that, besides many other things. But which we won't get into. But Chick Hearn, I remember first not as a Laker broadcaster, but the host of the local version of Bowling for Dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how I actually got to interview Larry Kenney. I was on YouTube looking for some episodes of Chick Hearn hosting Bowling for Dollars. Couldn't find anything, but I found a lot of other local versions from different markets around the country and happened upon Larry Kenney's version. I said, this guy's really good. Let me see if this guy's still alive. And sure enough, he is. And I looked up his Facebook page and he was there. And just like you, he messaged me back and we had a great interview. I did go to a taping of Bowling for Dollars. Our friend was on there, was about 2.5 years old. And on the first ball, she hit the channel. You can't say gutter, you got to say channel, as Larry's told me. And the second roll, she got 8 pins and won $8. But and then I met Chick when at a Laker game one time. I just shook hands, and then a couple of years later, there was a show called AM/FM with Dick Heatherton and Alicia Flannery, where they interviewed a bunch of different personalities. And he said, "We're having lunch with Chick Hearn in the conference room. You want to join us?" I said, "Yeah." So it was an afternoon I won't soon forget. I didn't get a picture with him, but goodness, I just couldn't believe it. I was having lunch with Chick Hearn.
I know. It is really something to end up meeting, someone that they're like, talk about on a pedestal, right? It's really something.
Definitely. Now, after KPFK, you went to KWIZ 96.7 in Orange County and spent 11 years there. Tell us about how you got to go to KWIZ.
Well, at the end of 1977, KPFK had one of their cyclical bankruptcies where not really, but they had to lay off a lot of people, myself included. And so it got to the end. I got my last paycheck, and I said, well, I guess it's time to maybe see what I might be able to do in commercial radio. So I recall getting an invitation to come up and interview for a station up in Bend, Oregon. So I flew up there. And, my resume was really pretty full of all kinds of things, but notably absent was any commercial experience. So they said, well, I'll tell you what, we have a station up in Idaho for greenhorns like yourself. Maybe you'd like to go up there. And I thought, I really don't. I'm a Southern California guy. I think I'll stick closer to home and see what I can do. So I moved back down to San Diego, hoping to find some work down there. Now, San Diego is, a great place to live, but it's mostly retirees and naval personnel. And there wasn't or defense contractors. And the radio market wasn't really at all what things were further north. So I didn't manage to get anything, but I redeemed the time. I went back to the college station, and I did a Saturday night show there to keep my chops up. Mm-hmm. And about that time, my father had an ophthalmologist, and he said, this ophthalmologist tells me he's got a nephew that owns some radio stations. Would you like to talk to him? I said, sure, why not? And so this fellow calls me by the name of Phil Davis and asked me a few questions, and I said, yeah, I'm a lifelong radio junkie. I'd love to get into commercial radio. And they said, well, we have, a couple of stations, Clock, KLOK in San Jose, and KWIZ in Santa Ana. I got a call from the program director, a man by the name of Bill Weaver, who said, come up, I'd like to meet you. And KWIZ AM was in a little building on the Willowick Golf Course in Santa Ana on 5th Street between Harbor and Fairview. And I was, kind of underwhelmed with Orange County. I was living, by the beach in North San Diego County at the time, and I thought, well, maybe, I don't know. I probably won't hear anything. Well, a few weeks later, I got a call. We'd like to offer you an afternoon shift, Sunday afternoon between 3 and 9, I think it was, on our FM station, which is broadcasting remotely from South Coast Village, which was a charming little bustling place at the time. It's kind of a ghost town now. So I said, well, okay, I'll come up on Sunday and do that. And the format at the time was kind of soft rock. It was kind of pre-coast, and it was okay. I thought it was pretty good, actually. Very loose. We played 15-minute sets, followed by a brief stop set, and there were 4 of those. At the top of the hour, we did news for about 1 minute, rip and read from the AP wire. And I got a little sense of, okay, it's kind of simple, and got a little rhythm going. I think my delivery might not have been exactly right because, again, I was kind of an album rock sensibility on a more AC station. So I kind of had to cultivate a little bit more of an adult sound because we also played some adult standards and so forth, which is the direction the station moved in. Eventually, they called it Young and Beautiful. It was pretty beautiful, but not particularly young. It was, standards, classics, Andy Williams, and it was Sinatra, who I love now, Barbra Streisand, and you like that. And I thought, wow, whoever would have thought that the Led Zeppelin fanatic would be playing Andy Williams, but I was. And trying to sound in my 20s like I, had some panache or something like that. But that's how I got started. I was there doing that part-time gig for about 5 months, I think. And then the regular all-night gal, Jan Marie, otherwise known as Strawberry Jan, when she moved over to KZY, was leaving, and they asked, would you like to do the overnight shift? And I thought, well, nothing's really happening down here. Why don't I do it for 6 months? I'll just go up there, and gigs don't last that long anyway, and I'll get a little experience. So I did take the job, and I started in the fall of 1978, and did overnights until I think it was May of '79. I had my fill of trying to sleep during the day. Which wasn't all that easy.
No, it isn't.
And work all night, and then they got me off and offered me midday.
Wow.
But how do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans, right? I mean, 6 months became 11 years, and I'm still living in Orange County, by the way, so it's kind of a miraculous story. But I was there both as an air personality, and then I took an interest in production, which ended up, I think, being really the major focus of my career. When I went up there, the production director at the time, Gary Marshall, not to be confused with the director and Penny Marshall's dad.
Oh, yeah.
This was another Gary Marshall who ended up working at KLSX. And
was he at KEarth 101 too as well?
Pardon me?
Was he also at KRLA originally and then KEarth 101 eventually?
Yes. Gary had been around a lot. And had been a veteran in the armed forces, and then afterwards got big into radio. But I watched what Gary was doing. He was very gracious to show me all the ropes, and I said, yeah, now this is something I would love to do someday. And I ended up, as he moved on, eventually being production director of KWIZ in my last few years there. And that was just one of the most creative times of my career.
Now, in addition to the standards, Young and Beautiful, of course, Dinah Krall would be not there for another, 15 or 20 years as far as those sounds were concerned, or Norah Jones when it came to Young and Beautiful. What other formats were there in the 11 years you were at KWIZ?
You mean at KWIZ or all around?
Oh, at KWIZ.
Well, the AM station was, we call it hot AC, I think, today. I mean, it was certainly a little livelier than the old standards that we were playing. And then at some point, we switched over back to kind of a soft rock. And this is interesting. If they had stuck with it, who knows? This was just before Coast switched from what we called elevator music, beautiful music, to the soft AC behemoth that it would become. But we did a format very similar to that. We called it Orange County's FM, and it had a real nice sound to it, and I liked it. But the higher ups had a better idea and switched us to something else, and we never got the credit that we blazed for this kind of format. Eventually, what happened to KWIZ is it got sold, and KWIZ AM became a Hispanic Spanish language station, and KWIZ FM was sold. It became Vietnamese, and then I think has had a couple of other owners in between. And I was actually part of one of the ownership changes from the Phil Davis, Bill Weaver era to Lieberman Broadcasting, and that's when they brought in the Spanish language on the AM. Interestingly enough, I was production director for them also, and they asked me to produce for the Spanish language station. Now, one problem, when I was in elementary school, we did have foreign languages, and you had a choice between French and Spanish. And my parents, being European transplants, put me in French.
Oh, no.
Well, so when's the last time you needed French in Southern California? Spanish would have been great. But what's interesting is they're pretty close. They're both Latin-based languages. So I kind of started to be able to figure out, with a transcript in hand, how to edit Spanish language and make it work. One of the interesting facets of that also, though, is that they did some Hispanic concerts in the park, and they wanted to do some concert spots, where you sample the different groups, a little music, and then one of their announcers would come in and do the voice track. And this was the early days of multi-track. They got me a little 4-track Tascam, which was enough to bounce, stereo to stereo. And I would put these things together. It was kind of a challenge, again, in another language. But in those days, sometimes people that were supposed to play came up from Mexico, and they actually got held up at the border. Not a problem today, obviously, but back then we actually had a border, and they would tell me, "Oh, this just in, tomorrow's concert, we're going to have to replace the band with someone else." And so today, of course, real simple. You just replace the segment, and that's that. Back then, wherever it was, you had to punch in to the tape, and then you have to remix the tape, and sometimes this would happen several times over. So that got to be a bit of a frustration, and I started looking for something else.
Now, over the years at KWIZ, when it was, the different English formats, who are some of the radio personalities you got to work with there?
Well, there was Bob Shannon, who we lost a few years ago. He did a really good morning show.
Very nice person, by the way.
Yes, Ronnie Richards, and John Novak, a.k.a. Larry Davis. Jim Bain, who ended up being probably the main mover and shaker at the Fullerton College radio program.
Oh, yeah.
And then a number of people that went on to great success in Los Angeles, one being Karen Sharp, who's now celebrating, I think, 30 or 35 years as the host of Love Songs on the Coast. Mary Price, who was one of the really, really great people in our business. She was big on Aero 93, among other places. And we had a really cool news staff. There's a guy named Spider McLean. Spider, and along with a guy named Ed Nix and Ralph Martin, these were older gentlemen, really good voices, great news voices. And Spider was just a kick. He was a big, tall, lanky guy. They called him Spider because when he was in the newsroom, you'd see him kind of reach for a cart with one hand, and he'd be touching, a tape machine with his right hand, and he was just all arms, real gangly, and just a great dry sense of humor. And I mentioned him because he was just a real great guy to work with.
That's great. I got to work with Mary Price while I was interning for Oldies 93 back in the early 90s, and she was weekends there, and of course got promoted when the format switched to classic rock in the Arrow, and she was the only DJ on Arrow for the entire 11 and a half years it was in on 93.1 FM. And then I worked with her for a couple of years at 95.9 The Fish, where she went by Mary Hughes as the newscaster for about 5 years, first with Bobby and Lara and Bobby and Randy, and then, of course, Scott and Sam now. So, she was just great. And then she's also doing imaging voices now for the mellowsound.net, which is a recreation of KNX-FM.
Yes, another KWIZ alum, Pat Veeling, is one of the movers and shakers behind that, and he and Mary have been working together a long time. In fact, Pat went on to become a very successful realtor, and Mary would narrate some of his online showpieces showing properties, and that, by the way, is another great way to make a few extra bucks doing voiceover that doesn't, necessarily depend on mega agents and competing with the likes of Tommy Lee Jones and Donald Sutherland, Oh,
yeah. This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. We're in conversation with Bill Wright, radio personality as well as production director and voiceover talent. Next time, Bill talks about his memories of working with David Nars, son of game show legend Jack Nars, and the nephew of another game show legend, Tom Kennedy, as well as working for 106.3 KYMS in Orange County.